Cheating fiancé dumped me for his coworker, but now he wants me back, after she cheated on him. Turns out, she has a huge secret that changes everything. I never imagined my life could unravel so quickly. Just a few months ago, I was happily engaged to Tom, the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. We had been together for 4 years, and the future seemed bright. But then, everything changed. It all started with little things. Tom began working late more often, claiming he had to finish up important projects at the office. He'd come home smelling like a mix of perfume and guilt, but I brushed it off as paranoia. I trusted him implicitly. After all, we were engaged, planning a wedding, a future together. One night, I decided to surprise him at work with his favourite dinner. I thought it would be a nice gesture, something to remind him of home. But when I arrived at his office, the receptionist gave me a strange look. "Tom left a couple of hours ago," she said, her eyes darting away. Confused and a little uneasy, I called him. His phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to sound casual, but my mind was racing. Where could he be? Later that evening, he walked in the door, looking dishevelled. "Rough day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," he replied, avoiding my gaze. "Lots of meetings." "That's funny," I said, my heart pounding. "I stopped by the office. The receptionist said you left early." He froze, the colour draining from his face. I had to run an errand." The tension between us grew thicker by the day. He became more secretive, more distant. I started to notice other things too, hushed phone calls, cryptic text messages, and the way he would quickly close his laptop whenever I walked into the room. It felt like I was living with a stranger. The final blow came on a rainy Thursday evening. I had been out with friends, trying to distract myself from the growing doubts gnawing at my mind. When I returned home, I found Tom's car in the driveway. I entered the house quietly, my heart heavy with dread. As I approached our bedroom, I heard muffled voices. I pushed open the door, and my worst fears were confirmed. Tom was in bed with Hannah, his co-worker. The shock paralysed me for a moment. They didn't even notice me standing there, too engrossed in their betrayal. "Tom," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He jolted upright, his eyes wide with panic. "Hannah, you need to leave," he stammered, scrambling out of bed. She grabbed her clothes and rushed past me without a word, not even meeting my eyes. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer immediately, just stood there, looking guilty and pathetic. "A few months," he finally admitted. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen," I echoed, disbelief and anger bubbling up inside me. "You made a choice, Tom. You chose to betray me." We argued for hours, his apologies and excuses falling on deaf ears. He tried to justify his actions, saying he felt neglected, that our relationship had become routine. It was all just noise to me. The man I loved, the man I trusted, had broken my heart in the worst possible way. Eventually, he made his decision. "I'm leaving," he said, packing a bag. "I'm in love with Hannah." I watched him go, tears streaming down my face. In an instant, my future with him was shattered. The wedding plans, the dreams of a family, all gone. I felt like a part of me had died that night. The next few weeks were a blur of pain and sorrow. I leaned heavily on my friends and family who rallied around me. My best friend Lisa moved in for a while to help me cope. She kept me busy, dragging me out for dinners, movies, anything to distract me from the emptiness inside. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, and started to rediscover who I was outside of my relationship with Tom. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the loneliness felt unbearable. But I was determined to move forward, to heal. One night, about 3 months after Tom left, I was at a cafe with Lisa when I saw him. He was sitting alone, staring into his coffee, looking more dishevelled than I had ever seen him. My heart skipped a beat. What was he doing here? Lisa followed my gaze and sighed. "Do you want to leave?" she asked, ready to whisk me away from the source of my pain. But I shook my head. "No, I need to do this." I approached his table, my heart pounding in my chest. "Tom," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He looked up, surprise and something else flickering in his eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, sitting down across from him. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He was broken too, and for a moment I wondered if we could ever piece ourselves back together. Tom's appearance at the cafe was a shock to my system. Seeing him again stirred up a whirlwind of emotions I thought I'd buried. Part of me wanted to get up and leave, but the other part needed answers. "Why are you here, Tom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "Hannah cheated on me," he said, the words heavy with regret. I didn't know where else to go. I felt a pang of satisfaction, but it was quickly drowned out by a wave of sadness. "I'm sorry," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity in my voice. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of desperation and remorse. "I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk? Please?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. We moved to a quieter corner of the cafe, away from prying eyes. Tom began to pour out his story, and as he spoke, I saw the cracks in his bravado, the vulnerability he had always tried to hide. "It started out great with Hannah," he said, his voice trembling. "She was fun, exciting, everything I thought I wanted, but it didn't take long for things to go sour. She started acting distant, secretive. I found out she was seeing someone else behind my back. I was such a fool." I watched him, the pain in his eyes a mirror of my own past anguish. "Why are you telling me this, Tom? What do you want from me?" "I want to apologize," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I hurt you more than I can ever make up for, but I'm here because I realized what I lost. I want you back." His words hung in the air, heavy and full of implications. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "Tom, you shattered my trust. You chose her over me. How can you expect me to just forgive and forget?" He reached out, taking my hand in his. "I don't expect it to be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. Please, just give me a chance." I pulled my hand away, the memories of his betrayal still raw. "I need time to think," I said, standing up. "This isn't something I can decide overnight." He nodded, looking defeated but hopeful. "I understand. Take all the time you need." That night I lay in bed, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to believe that people could change, that love could conquer all. But another part of me, the part that had been wounded so deeply, was screaming to protect myself. The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions. My friends and family had strong opinions on the matter. Lisa, ever protective, was vehemently against giving Tom another chance. "He broke your heart once. What makes you think he won't do it again?" she argued. My parents, on the other hand, were more forgiving. "People make mistakes," my mother said gently. "If he truly regrets it and wants to make amends, maybe it's worth considering." Torn between their advice and my own feelings, I decided to meet Tom again. We went for a walk in the park, where we used to spend lazy Sundays together. It was a place filled with both happy memories and the ghost of what could have been. "Tom," I began, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and while I appreciate your apology and your willingness to change, I need to know what exactly you're offering. How can I be sure this won't happen again?" He stopped and looked at me, his eyes earnest. "I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise that I will be completely honest with you, that I'll work on myself and our relationship. I want to go to therapy, both individually and together, if you'll have me. I know I messed up, but I love you, and I am willing to fight for us." His sincerity touched me, but it wasn't enough to erase the pain. "I'll think about it," I said, not committing to anything yet. As days turned into weeks, Tom and I continued to have these conversations. He opened up about his insecurities, his fears, and his realization of what he had thrown away. I saw glimpses of the man I had fallen in love with, but the wounds he had inflicted were still fresh. Then, one evening, as we were sitting in my living room, Tom dropped a bombshell. "There's something you need to know about Hannah," he said, his voice grave. "I found out that she has been leading a double life. She has a criminal history and has used multiple identities to manipulate several people, including me." I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about?" He handed me a folder filled with documents and photos. As I went through them, I felt a chill run down my spine. There were records of her previous arrests, different aliases she had used, and even testimonies from other victims of her schemes. "How did you find all this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "After she cheated on me, I started digging into her past. I hired a private investigator," he explained. "I needed to know who I had thrown my life away for." The enormity of the situation began to sink in. Hannah wasn't just a cheater, she was a con artist. And Tom, in his misguided search for excitement, had become one of her many victims. "I thought you should know," he said softly, "not to excuse what I did, but to give you the full picture." The revelation about Hannah added a new layer to my confusion. It was clear that Tom had been manipulated, but it didn't absolve him of his betrayal. I needed to figure out what this meant for us and whether we could truly rebuild what had been broken. As I sat there, staring at the evidence of Hannah's deceit, I realized that the decision I faced was more complicated than I had ever imagined. The revelation about Hannah's criminal history left me reeling. My emotions were a tangled mess of anger, betrayal, and confusion. While Tom had undeniably hurt me, Hannah's manipulations added a sinister twist to the story. As I sifted through the documents Tom had provided, the full extent of her deceit became clear. The next day, I decided to confront Hannah. I needed to hear her side of the story, to understand why she had done what she did. I tracked her down to a trendy coffee shop she frequented, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. When I walked in, she was sitting at a corner table, sipping on an iced latte and scrolling through her phone. She looked up and froze when she saw me approaching. "Hannah," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need to talk." She tried to brush me off, but I wasn't having it. "Sit down," I insisted. "I know about your past, all of it." Her face went pale and she glanced around nervously. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I have the documents, Hannah. Records of your arrests, your multiple identities. You've been manipulating people for years. Why did you target Tom?" She sighed, realizing the jig was up. "Look, it wasn't personal. Tom was just convenient. He was looking for something exciting, and I needed a place to lay low. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Mutually beneficial?" I repeated, incredulous. "You destroyed our relationship, our future. How is that beneficial?" She looked down, a flicker of remorse crossing her face. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't expect to get caught up in this mess, but for what it's worth, I am sorry." Her apology felt hollow, but it was the closest thing to an admission of guilt I was going to get. "Stay away from Tom," I warned her, "and from me. If you come near us again, I will go to the police." She nodded, her expression resigned. "I understand." With that, I walked away, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Confronting Hannah had given me some closure, but it also left me with more questions about my future with Tom. When I got home, I called Lisa and told her everything. "I confronted Hannah," I said, my voice shaking with the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. She admitted to everything. She was using Tom. Lisa was silent for a moment before speaking. "I'm glad you got some answers, but what does this mean for you and Tom?" "I don't know," I admitted. "He's been a victim too, but it doesn't change what he did to me." "You need to decide if you can forgive him," she said gently, "and if you think you can rebuild your trust in him." Over the next few days, Tom and I continued our conversations. He was deeply remorseful, and the more he opened up, the more I saw the genuine regret in his eyes. He was willing to do whatever it took to make things right, but the decision ultimately rested with me. One evening, as we sat in my living room, Tom took my hand. "I know I have no right to ask this, but will you give me another chance? I want to make things right, to be the partner you deserve." I looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deceit, but all I saw was sincerity and a deep longing to fix what he had broken. "Tom, if we do this, it won't be easy. Trust is hard to rebuild, and it'll need time." "I understand," he said, squeezing my hand. "I'll be patient. I just want a chance to prove myself to you." We decided to take things slow. Tom moved back into his own apartment, and we started seeing a therapist together. The sessions were intense and emotional, but they helped us both confront our issues and start the healing process. As we worked through our problems, I began to see changes in Tom. He was more open, more communicative, and genuinely committed to making things right. Slowly, my walls started to come down, and I allowed myself to hope that we could rebuild our relationship on a stronger foundation. But the shadow of Hannah's deceit still loomed over us. One afternoon, while we were having lunch, Tom received a call from the private investigator he had hired. "Hannah's been arrested," he said, his eyes wide with shock. "She's been charged with multiple counts of fraud and identity theft." The news hit us both like a ton of bricks. While it meant that Hannah would no longer be a threat to us, it also brought back painful memories of the betrayal. "Are you okay?" I asked, squeezing Tom's hand. He nodded, though his expression was strained. "Yeah, I can't believe I fell for her lies. I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid, Tom," I said softly. "She was a master manipulator, but now that she's out of the picture, we can focus on us, on healing." He smiled weakly, grateful for my support. "Thank you. I don't deserve you, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to." As the weeks turned into months, Tom and I continued to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pain of his betrayal felt overwhelming, but through therapy, honest communication, and a lot of patience, we slowly started to heal. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, Tom took my hand and looked into my eyes. "I know I've said this before, but I need you to know how truly sorry I am. I love you, and I will never take you for granted again." Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were tears of hope. "I love you too, Tom, and I believe in second chances. Let's make the most of ours." With Hannah's deceit exposed and Tom's commitment to change, we faced our future with a renewed sense of hope and determination. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were ready to walk it together, one step at a time. As the months passed, Tom and I worked diligently to repair the damage done to our relationship. Therapy sessions became a cornerstone of our routine, and they were both challenging and enlightening. Each session peeled back layers of hurt and misunderstanding, forcing us to confront not just the affair, but also the underlying issues that had led us there. One evening, after a particularly intense session, we decided to take a walk in the park where we'd had so many happy moments before everything fell apart. The crisp autumn air was refreshing, and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot was oddly soothing. As we walked, Tom held my hand tightly, a gesture that felt both familiar and new. "Do you ever think about the future?" Tom asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. I looked at him, considering his question. "All the time, but it's different now. Before I had this clear vision of what our future would look like. Now it's more fluid." He nodded, understanding. "I know I shattered that vision, but I want to build a new one with you, one that's stronger and more honest." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I want that too, Tom, but it's going to take time." We continued walking, talking about our hopes and fears. Tom's sincerity and commitment were clear, and I felt a sense of cautious optimism. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. The next day, I received a call from the police. They wanted to speak with me about Hannah. Apparently, she had named me in her confession, trying to implicate me in her schemes to lessen her own charges. I was furious and scared, but I knew I had done nothing wrong. I agreed to meet with the detectives, hoping to clear my name once and for all. Tom insisted on coming with me to the police station. As we sat in the waiting room, he held my hand, his presence a comforting anchor. The meeting with the detectives was intense, but ultimately they believed my story. They assured me that Hannah's accusations were baseless and that she was simply trying to deflect blame. When we left the station, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you for being there," I said to Tom, my voice shaky with relief. "Always," he replied, pulling me into a tight embrace. "We're in this together." That night, as we sat on the couch, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. We talked about the future, about our dreams and plans. And for the first time, I truly believed that we could make it work. A few weeks later, Tom surprised me with a weekend getaway to a cozy cabin in the mountains. It was a chance for us to reconnect away from the stress of everyday life. The cabin was perfect, secluded, surrounded by nature, and with a breathtaking view of the mountains. As we sat by the fireplace one evening, Tom pulled out a small box from his pocket. My heart skipped a beat as he opened it to reveal a beautiful ring. "I know this isn't the first time I've asked, but this time it's different," he said, his eyes full of hope and love. "Will you marry me for real this time? Will you give me the chance to prove that I've changed, that we can have a future together?" Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him. The road we had travelled was long and painful, but it had brought us to this moment. "Yes, Tom," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." The next few months were a whirlwind of wedding planning and continued therapy. We wanted our marriage to start on a solid foundation, free from the shadows of the past. Our friends and family, who had seen us through the worst of times, rallied around us, offering their love and support. The day of our wedding dawned bright and clear. As I walked down the aisle, I felt a sense of peace and joy. Tom stood at the altar, his eyes shining with love and determination. When we exchanged our vows, it felt like a new beginning, a promise to build a life together, based on trust and honesty. After the ceremony, as we danced under the stars, I reflected on our journey. It hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but we had faced our demons, exposed the lies, and chosen to rebuild our lives together. As the night wore on, Tom and I slipped away from the crowd to steal a quiet moment together. "We did it," he said, pulling me close. "Yes, we did," I replied, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "And we'll keep doing it one day at a time." In the end, our story was one of redemption and second chances. It was a testament to the power of love and forgiveness, and to the strength that comes from facing your darkest fears and emerging stronger. As I looked into Tom's eyes, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together, hand in hand. Thank you for reading our story. It's been a long and winding road, but sharing it with you has been a cathartic experience. What do you think about second chances? Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone you loved? I'd love to hear your thoughts and stories.